Amen.
All right. Well, welcome to Leadership Mindsets with Kathryn Martens. I talk to all kinds of leaders about how they think. This is a chance to broaden our ideas of leadership and hear from leaders about how they successfully inspire and motivate others on a daily basis. We will hear their stories, the joys and triumphs, and the challenges of leadership. It's my hope that as we get an insight behind the scenes of how these leaders think, and as we hear their stories of choosing bravery, humility, morality, that we will all be inspired to reflect a little deeper about the way that we think too. And we will challenge ourselves to also have healthy mindsets. My guest today is Michael Schaefer from 3 Chairs Counselling and Emmanuel Focused Training. He may be based in Brisbane, but he works with people all over the world. So welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Kathryn. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. It's also great to have had many years now of knowing about your particular counselling services. And we wonder if you might just catch up our listeners and tell them a little bit about what you're currently doing, and then we'll get a bit more in how you got there. But tell us, 3 Chairs Counselling and Emmanuel Focused Training, what are you up to? What are you doing?
Well, look, I started off learning inner healing before I did counselling. So I had a very inner healing focus for some time. And so when it came in recent years to choosing a name for a business, 3 Chairs sounded really good to me because there's always a third chair involved. There's you and me, and there's a third presence. And if you can learn to interact with that third presence, and you can call that spiritually assisted psychotherapy. Wow, all sorts of things can happen that I wouldn't expect to happen as much when there's only 2 people involved. So that's the rationale behind 3 Chairs Counselling. And Emmanuel Focused Training is a training organisation I got up with, partnering with a chap just north of Chicago in the States, Andy Ross.
One of the things that's always been something I've admired about you is that you've been keen to train others in the things that you find that are beneficial, but you're also willing to continue being trained yourself. You're always looking to learn and to grow and to find new ways of doing things.
I've really been an early adopter of things to heal trauma and practice them, and done master's sort of research projects on them, using qualitative research. Yet, and what I've come up to in the last year is a process called the Richards trauma approach. I found someone who I knew previously, before, after, and his life was extremely different. And it affected not just his PTSD, but the way he respected himself. For instance, he prioritized going on holidays, getting a camper van to travel around the country because he wanted to, and different stuff of self-care, self-respect. And I just thought, well, good on you. If anyone deserves it, you do. And he started really caring for himself. Instead of giving money away all the time, he actually saved it and spent it on good things like himself and his family. He started training in the approach and sees just massive change on a normal basis with people coming with depression or anxiety, a lot of stress. It's like a reset, of a back to factory reset on a phone. And people, their scores for depression, anxiety, stress just go way down. Because they start being able to do things that they couldn't do before.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who are thinking, well, that's really wonderful news, because it's hope-giving, isn't it? To think that healing is possible from trauma.
And especially when there's been a fair bit.
I was only just doing a workshop last night where we were talking about being brave in the way that we do leadership. And one of the ways we do that is to face our fears. We may set a goal and have great intentions and visions, but then we get stuck in our own thinking and we can't move forward. And it's usually because we have some internal thinking that, is holding us back. And how do we push through that? Well, usually it might involve actually thinking about, well, where has that come from? Digging a bit deeper and needing to actually get the support around you for how you can deal with that inner thinking to be able to then move forward. This makes me actually think about the difference between coaching and counselling, because here you are talking about some of these same issues as a counsellor, as I do when I'm coaching. Let's unpack that together as a way of being helpful to people, because I don't know about you, it's probably a question I get very, very frequently. You go first. You tell me your take, and I'll add to it if I need to.
I mean, I can tell a story about that, because when I first set up in Sydney in the early this century, I used to offer a service to coaches to say, if you've got someone who's not working well with you, you're not getting the results you want, send them to me. I'll do some healing, and I'll send them back, and you'll get your results. And so that was my understanding of how coaching works. You get someone who's good at it, which is not me, but you can send someone who there's stuff rumbling around it that isn't resolved. And if you resolve it, then they're ready for coaching. They want to move forward. They want to address the challenges. But the reality is a lot of people, they want to run and hide. They're not. They've had some ideas and thoughts of what they'd like to achieve, but it's so much internal work to overcome things that are being triggered every day. And it's hard to do that. And my approach has simply been, well, why not go and do some healing? Turn off those video loops of traumas that are going round and round every day. Once they're turned off, well, now you can focus. You're not somewhere else in your psyche back at 7 or 10 or 22 when something happened. That you're not being drawn back into the sensations and thoughts and feelings of that. You're here, you're present, you're focusing on your family, on your business, on what you need to focus on. It's not being drawn back down. So I don't know if that's a good description, Kathryn, but that's the way I see it.
I think it was a pretty good description to me. I'm very careful when I'm doing my coaching to know when it is time to refer to a counsellor or a psychologist. And when it's a little bit of a blurry line, but this is the best way I can describe is when I'm kind of like, oh, I think this might be time, is when we have got to a place where perhaps we've named what the fear is or what the issue is, what the negative thinking is, maybe even identified what the trauma was, if they're aware enough of that. But we don't dig into it. So it's then after we've named it, we'll go, okay, we might try some of those simple strategies of changing the way we think, challenging our thoughts, making action plans for the future. And if that's not enough, then absolutely I say, well, you might like to see someone else to dig into some of those previous past things that are holding you back. I've actually got probably maybe not half, but almost half of my client base who see someone in the counselling world as well as me at the same time, because they offer different things, because coaching and counselling are different. And I know you and I have often talked to each other about this very question, because we've been saying, well, when would we refer to each other? And so that's been clarifying as well. Some people simplify it right down when they talk about coaching and say that it's action-oriented and future-focused. And I agree with that to a point. There's a little bit of pausing sometimes and reflecting that's needed to just ascertain what's holding the person back from moving forward and from taking those action steps if they feel stuck. And I don't know if anyone's looked at my logo, but it's actually a swirl of we're stuck in a cycle kind of swirl, but then there's a loop kind of coming out of the swirl. And so being released then out of that sense of stuckness and cycle that we get stuck in, so that we can then be future focused and action oriented. And a big part of being able to be those things is identifying what's stopping you. So we do have conversations about what's stopping you. And then at some point I then go, well, looks like you might need help from a professional. I think, what I'd love to talk with you more about too is something that has come up from time to time with some of my other interviewees, and that's the world of mental health in the workplace. And the workplace could be an organization, it could be a business, or it could be a church, or any sort of place where everyone's trying to work towards a common cause, whether there's money or not involved. Do you have your own story to tell, or stories of your clients that might give some people some hope who are there struggling with mental health, either trauma-based or not, and they're just really needing help to move forward? What would you say to them right now?
The simple summary I've heard from people, and it was helpful for me when I went through what I would call significant bullying in a workplace I was in. The simple advice I've been given is, so many people say, I'm so glad I got out. And because what happens is people stay too long in a destructive environment, and then their energy is depleted, their resources are depleted, their resilience is depleted. And it's not good to leave it a long time, just hoping something will change. So that's part A of my response. But the other half is that, if a whole lot of things, they do remind you of things earlier in your life. For instance, neglect in your childhood or bullying in your childhood, that sort of stuff. And if you can get some deep work, that can shift, and you can come with a different, it's not just a mindset, but it come with like a different energy into your work, where you take up more space, where you've got a right to be there, where you've got a right to be respected. It's a different space, and you put something different out, which is needed for you to be treated different. And so once you help someone get into that space, a whole lot of things can shift in the workplace anyway. They can become respected. And it's a bit weird because they respect themselves so much more. And I think it's miraculous to see that.
Yeah.
And yet it makes perfect sense to me as well. And I can give an example of someone who'd got a very high-flying job, but she was pretty much a shut-in. She was agoraphobic. She was scared of so many things. And she rang up on the first day at work and said, it wasn't to me, it was to a colleague, and said, what am I going to do? This is crazy. They want to send me overseas in a couple of weeks. And they said, book in quickly and do some very deep work. And a whole lot of stuff can shift massively. And you can be you can deliver what you can deliver. But with the other stuff going on, with mental health stuff holding you down, it's just so hard to perform. It's so stressful trying to perform.
What happened to the lady? Did she end up going overseas and all was well?
Yes, she was healed.
Wow.
And I don't think in this context, going into the stories, we don't want to do it too extensively, but she was someone who was trying to be trained as an elite athlete, but by someone who was very abusive. And that was all there still, hadn't been resolved at all. But when it was resolved, then it's gone. And so those videotapes are gone. So I don't have to be stressed about walking down the street or going to work or performing, because I love performing. I love doing complex things. I can do them. But it's all the other stuff coming through that holds people back.
I know, as you've been telling the story there, that you've certainly, struck a nerve on a couple of points with me, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. There'll be other listeners the same. One is when you referred to respect, that I think every leader, ultimately, that's what we want. We want to feel respected. And we've often kind of got those insecurities underneath that we don't speak out loud of, like, will they respect me questions. In whoever it is that we're leading. But the other thing is the bravery that it takes to be vulnerable enough to submit to a process like what you're describing. So the steps prior to making that call to someone like you, what kind of tips would you have for maybe a leader that's listening going, I know I want those sort of outcomes you're talking about, that greater respect, that being able to have a greater sense of presence that would come if I dealt with my stuff. But that step to submit myself to the process just feels too big right now.
Yeah, I think we all need enough information to make an intelligent decision. So one way to get that is to have a short appointment and talk about it. Really, just to say, look, this is how it works. This is the process we use. This is what is normal outcomes. This is what will be asked of you in the process. And it's worked for so many others. We would expect, you would expect it to work for you.
My coaching language would be kind of, what have you got to lose? Because you could just stay in the status quo and stay stuck if you don't try. Yeah.
And look, Kathryn, I think the problem with a whole lot of unresolved stuff, and it doesn't have to be a whole lot actually, but it bounces around, and then there becomes more things that we can't process properly. And it's a stress on our body, mind, spirit. It's weighing us down, and people literally get sick. People
Yes.
get autoimmune diseases and all sorts of stuff because their body's still stuck in the past. They think it needs to be in fight or flight or freeze mode, when that was 30 years ago, 50 years ago. You don't have to be there, but your body thinks it does. And it's not really open to reason. You need another way to get in there and shift it. So even elite performers, and some of my coaches that one of them, she trained elite golfers, another one opera singers. Like, they do a lot of elite work, and if they can shift stuff in them, then a whole lot of the anxiety goes, and they can perform better than they could perform before, basically. So
yeah. And I'm just picking up on that word performance. We often hear that bandied around in business terms, high performing teams. Well, what does that really mean? It basically just means that everyone's working at their optimum, both individually and then together. And so that's really kind of just what we all want, really, to be at our best. And it's clearing out the clutter from our history and dealing with the mess that's there and receiving the healing so that we can be our best. That's what I'm hearing. And this is coming from a place where I have done, as you know, quite a bit of that work, and I now am wanting to promote it in some ways. I am a personal testimony to the liberation and the strength of self-confidence that has come as a result of having dealt with some of those things, even in my own story. Here I am hosting this podcast, and I can tell you there is no way I would have done something like this 20, 30 years ago. So I hope that there are some people out there who just might be encouraged from our conversation today to just take that next step of bravery to move towards what they know perhaps has needing to be addressed in their own lives and have been putting it off. So thanks so much, Michael, for coming on the show today. Unfortunately, we've run out of time now, Michael, but before we go, would you just tell us how can people get in touch with you if what we've talked about today has made them think they'd like to get in touch?
Yeah, for sure. Easy to find on a Google search or any search, because my 3 chairs starts with a 3. So Michael Schaefer, and if you put in 3 chairs counselling, that'll bring me up. I have one website, which is the Emmanuel Focused Training website, and that's emmanuelfocusedtraining.com. And if you put in any combination of all those things, you'll find me. So
fantastic.
And just fill in a contact form, and I'll get back to you reasonably promptly.
Yeah. Well, thank you again so much for coming on the show today. It's just been a fabulous chance to chat with you.
Thank you, Kathryn. It's been lovely, and I just enjoy your joy strength that
Thank you.
that's developed so much over the years. It's a joy to be with you.
Oh,
So
thanks.
thank you so much.